I still remember very clearly an afternoon many years ago. Nothing particularly dramatic happened. It was just a very small sentence from someone, but it hit exactly where I was most exhausted. I reacted almost instantly. My voice rose, my body felt hot, my heart started racing, and only a few seconds later, I said things that, if I had given myself 10 more seconds to think, I would never have said. When everything settled down, what remained was not victory and not relief. It was a very familiar emptiness. The shame of having let emotion drag me away. The helplessness of realizing this was not the first time, and probably would not be the last. For a long time, I believed anger was a problem of circumstance. If the other person had not said that sentence, if everything had not piled up at once, if I had not been tired, I would not have been angry. It sounded reasonable. But the more I experienced life, the more I realized a more uncomfortable truth. Circumstances are only the spark. What truly determines the fire lies inside. There was a period when I tried to control anger by suppressing it. I told myself that adults should not lose their temper. I tried to appear calm, but anger did not disappear. It only changed location. It went deeper, and then it leaked out in other ways. A cold look, a sarcastic remark, an unnecessary distance. I no longer exploded, but I was no longer at peace either. A philosopher once said that anger is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. At the time, I just thought the sentence sounded clever. Later, I understood how true it was. Every time I became angry, the first person harmed was not the one in front of me. It was me. My energy burned away. My focus vanished, and most dangerously, I began to grow accustomed to that state, as if it was simply part of who I was. What truly woke me up was realizing that anger is not an uncontrollable reflex. It is a very fast chain of interpretations. An event happens. The mind instantly assigns meaning to it. From that meaning, emotion arises, and only after that does action occur. Everything happens so quickly that it feels like you have no choice. But in reality, there is always a very small gap in between. Stoic philosophers view anger in a very different way. They do not see it as something to be destroyed through inner violence. They see it as an error in judgment. When you are angry, it is not because the event itself is terrible, but because you believe it should not have happened. You believe the world has wronged you, and that belief is the true source of suffering. I began to observe my anger again, not to blame myself, but to understand. I realized that behind every outburst of anger, there was always a broken expectation. I expected others to understand me, to behave the way I believed was right, to respect boundaries I had never clearly expressed, and when reality did not match expectation, anger appeared as a defensive response. There was a time when I was late because of a very small mistake made by someone else. I became angry, but if I was honest, what truly upset me was not the incident itself. It was the thought that my time was not respected. When I brought that thought into the light, the anger weakened very quickly, because I realized it was a story I was telling myself, not an objective truth. The first Stoic principle I learned was not about suppressing anger, but about delaying reaction. Not to become morally superior, but to allow reason enough time to appear. Anger is strongest in the first few seconds. If you do not act during that window, it begins to lose momentum. Not because you defeated it, but because its nature is temporary. I once read a sentence saying that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies human freedom. When you are angry, your only task is not to decide what is right or wrong. It is to widen that space a little. Just a few seconds, a few breaths, a small step back in the mind. From that moment on, I stopped seeing not getting angry as a moral goal. I began to see it as a skill. And like any skill, it must be trained in very small situations, not when anger has already exploded like a large fire, but when it is still only a faint warmth inside the body. This is the foundation of mental discipline, not forcing yourself to become emotionless, but learning to recognize what you are interpreting before emotion carries you too far. And to do that, you need very specific principles, not to memorize, but to live with. In the next part, we will begin to enter those principles, not as dry rules, but as supports that help you stay grounded when anger tries to take control. The first rule of Stoicism does not begin with controlling anger. It begins with classifying reality. There are things within your control, and there are things outside it. This sounds familiar, but almost every outburst of anger comes from trying to control the wrong things. You get angry because others do not behave the way you want. You get angry because events do not unfold according to plan. You get angry because the past cannot be changed. All of these lie outside your power. When you demand control where you do not have it, anger becomes an inevitable reaction. Not because you are ill-tempered, but because you are repeatedly running your head into a wall. A sage once said that if you want no one to harm you, give up the demand that others must live by your standards. This does not mean weakly accepting everything. It means you stop placing your emotional state in other people's hands. When you do that, anger loses its most important source of fuel. The second rule is to see anger as a signal, not a command. When you feel angry, the mind says, react now, fix this, prove something. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. Emotions provide information, not instructions. Anger tells you that something in your interpretation feels threatened. Your task is to examine that interpretation, not to act on it. Think back to a time when you got angry and later regretted it. What you regretted was rarely the emotion itself, it was the action. If you can separate these two, you are already halfway there. You can allow anger to appear without allowing it to take the wheel. The third rule is to delay judgment. Stoics believe that much of our suffering comes from labeling too quickly. Good, bad, offensive, unfair. But events themselves are often far more neutral than the names we give them. A sentence can simply be a sound. An action can simply be an action. It is your label that turns it into a personal attack. I once tried a very simple exercise. Whenever I felt angry, I described the situation in my mind using the coldest language possible. No adjectives, no emotion, just facts. Strangely, the anger weakened very quickly because it cannot survive long in an environment without dramatic stories. The fourth rule is to remember that no one acts wrongly on purpose in their own world. When someone does something that angers you, it is very rare that they wake up intending to hurt you. They act based on their understanding, beliefs, and limitations. This does not excuse harmful behavior, but it removes the illusion that you are being deliberately attacked. An emperor once wrote that when someone does wrong, remember that they act according to what they believe is right. When this truly sinks in, anger transforms into something else. Perhaps disappointment, perhaps sadness, but no longer fire. The fifth rule is to practice the view from above. When you are angry, the world shrinks until only you and the problem exist. Stoicism teaches you to pull the camera back. See yourself as a small human in a city, on a planet, in a very long timeline. Not to deny emotion, but to place it in proper proportion. What enrages you right now, will it still matter in 1 year, in 5 years? Anger feeds on the feeling that everything is critical. When you change the scale, it begins to lose weight. Not because the problem disappears, but because you no longer pour your entire identity into it. These 5 rules do not destroy anger. They weaken its foundation. And once that foundation is unstable, you can go deeper into the next rules, where mental discipline stops being a reflexive reaction and becomes a response trained over time. In the next part, we will continue with the remaining rules. Rules that not only reduce anger, but help you build an inner strength solid enough that anger has far fewer chances to arise in the first place. The sixth Stoic rule touches a very sensitive point. It is how you perceive offense. Most anger does not erupt because of material loss, but because the ego has been touched. You feel disrespected, looked down on, denied. And in that very moment, anger appears as a reflex to protect your self-image. But Stoicism asks a very cold question. Does your dignity truly live in the words or actions of others? If someone says something foolish, does that make them foolish, or does it make you smaller? When you understand that your value cannot be taken away by a sentence, anger loses its reason to exist. A philosopher once said that if someone insults you, ask yourself whether they are right. If they are right, learn. If they are wrong, ignore it. In both cases, anger is unnecessary. What makes us angry is not the words themselves, but the need to protect a fragile image of ourselves in front of the world. The seventh rule is to practice seeing the outcome before reacting. Stoics call this anticipating consequences. Not to be pessimistic, but to be clear-headed. Before you react in anger, imagine very concretely what will happen afterward, where those words will lead. What consequences that action will create. Not in theory, but in your real life. I once did this in the middle of an argument. At the exact moment I wanted to say the harshest sentence, I imagined having to apologize later. I imagined the awkward silence. I imagined the familiar feeling of self-contempt. Just a few seconds of that visualization were enough to extinguish the fire. Not because I was more virtuous, but because I did not want to pay that familiar price one more time. The eighth rule is to practice self-control in very small things. Stoicism does not believe in training discipline only during major crises. They believe that how you react to small annoyances determines how you will react to great anger. If you get irritated by long lines, snappy in traffic, impatient with minor inconveniences, you are training the mind into a dangerous reflex. On the other hand, every time you choose not to react to a very small discomfort, you are training an invisible muscle, the muscle of delayed reaction. And when major anger appears, that muscle steps in to carry the weight for you. Not through theory, but through deeply ingrained habit. A soldier does not learn calm in the middle of battle. He learns it through repeated drills. The mind is the same. You cannot expect clarity at the peak of anger if you have never practiced composure in ordinary moments. The ninth rule is to accept the imperfect nature of human beings, including yourself. Many people are angry not only at others, but at themselves for having reacted that way. They are angry at their own anger, and a new loop is created. Stoicism does not ask you to become emotionless. It asks you to become honest. Honest that you are human, that sometimes you will feel anger, but each time is an opportunity to observe, not to condemn. When you stop beating yourself for being angry, anger loses its final layer of fuel. These 9 rules are not meant to be memorized like a checklist. They exist to change how you stand in the world. When you no longer demand the world to bend to your emotions, when you no longer attach your value to instant reactions, anger no longer has ground to grow. In the final part, we will connect all of this back to mental discipline. Not discipline as suppression, but discipline as freedom. Freedom from reactions you always regret later. Freedom from letting a moment of heat ruin days of peace. If you look back at the 9 rules, you will notice one clear common point. None of them ask you to crush anger. None ask you to pretend calm while boiling inside. All of them revolve around one thing only: discipline in how you interpret reality. This is where mental discipline becomes completely different from suppression. Suppression is trying to push emotion down. Discipline is changing how that emotion is created in the first place. A Stoic does not ask how to never be angry. They ask what belief allowed anger to arise. There is a very ordinary morning. You are in a hurry. A small thing goes wrong and anger rises. If you live by old reflexes, you think the day is ruined, that everything is against you. But if you have trained mental discipline, a different thought appears. This is just a neutral event, and I am adding meaning to it. That moment of recognition is where power lives. A philosopher once said that we are not disturbed by events, but by our judgments about events. It sounds simple, but living it requires immense discipline. Not discipline of action, but discipline of attention. What you give attention to gains power. When you give anger your full attention, it grows quickly. When you see it as a phenomenon arising in the mind, it begins to dissolve. Not because you chase it away, but because you stop identifying with it. You do not say, "I am angry." You say, "There is anger appearing." The difference is subtle, but the impact is profound. This is one of the most important Stoic practices, separating yourself from emotion. Not to escape it, but to observe it. When you observe, you regain choice. When you identify, you lose it. Mental discipline is the ability to remain the observer long enough not to be swept away. There was a man named Victor who was known for his temper. He reacted quickly, spoke sharply, then regretted it. When he began practicing Stoicism, he did not try to change his personality overnight. He set one very small rule. Whenever anger arose, he would not speak for 3 breaths, just 3. At first, it was extremely difficult, but over time, within those 3 breaths, he began to hear his own thoughts, to see his options. Those 3 breaths did not turn him into a gentle person instantly, but they created a gap. And that gap is where discipline is born. Not through big decisions, but through very short pauses, repeated enough time. Interestingly, as you practice this, anger begins to change shape. It is no longer a sudden explosion. It becomes a predictable wave. You start noticing early signs: a tight jaw, a faster heartbeat, a judgmental thought. And because you see it early, you are no longer caught by surprise. Mental discipline is not perfect reaction in every situation. It is faster recovery. Fewer words you cannot take back. Fewer actions that require apology. And most importantly, fewer moments that ruin an entire day. There is a saying I always remember, that the strongest person is not the one who conquers others, but the one who conquers their own reactions. This victory is quiet. No one applauds. But it transforms the entire quality of your inner life. In this final section, we close the journey, not with a promise that you will never be angry again, but with a gentler truth. That anger may still appear, but it will no longer control your life as it once did. There is one important thing that must be stated clearly here. Stoicism does not promise you a life without anger. It promises you a life where anger no longer rules you. These are completely different things. Anger will still arise because you are human. Your ego will still be touched. There will still be tired days, careless words, unfavorable circumstances. But what changes is this. When anger appears, you no longer immediately believe the story it tells. You no longer identify with it. You no longer rush to defend a fragile image of yourself with reactions that later cost you dearly. That is mental discipline. Not rigidity, but intentional flexibility. You know when to stay silent, when to speak, when to walk away. Not out of fear, but because you have seen the endings of familiar paths and you choose not to walk them again. A sage once said that the best revenge is not to become like the one who harmed you, but looked at more deeply. That sentence is not about the other person. It is about you. Every time you react in anger, you allow external circumstances to shape your inner character. Every time you choose not to react, you keep your sovereignty. The true value of Stoicism is not in beautiful quotes. It is in a quiet feeling you notice only after practicing for some time. The feeling that you are no longer swept away as easily as before, that there is space between you and events. And in that space, you can breathe. You begin to see that many things that once made you explode are not worth carrying anymore. That many arguments you once won brought no peace. And that many moments of silence saved you from unnecessary consequences. Not because you were weak, but because you became stronger than your immediate reactions. If there is one final practice to take with you, it is this. Each evening, look back at one moment during the day when you almost became angry. Not to blame yourself, but to observe. What did you think? What label did you apply? And if that situation appears again tomorrow, how would you like to respond differently? This practice will not make you perfect, but it will make you a little more awake each day. Mental discipline is not something you achieve and keep forever. It is a choice repeated. Some days you do well, some days you slip. What matters is that you do not turn those slips into proof that you cannot change. You simply see them as reminders that you are still learning. And if you are looking for a strong enough reason to begin, remember this. Every uncontrolled burst of anger takes something from you, a piece of energy, a piece of clarity, a piece of a relationship. Stoicism does not teach you to endure that better. It teaches you that you do not need to pay that price anymore. When you no longer let anger drive your life, you will discover something very quiet. Peace does not come from everything going your way. It comes from no longer needing everything to go your way.